Good afternoon. I want to welcome everyone to part 4 of our 4-part series on termite biology and control. Before we get started, I want to go over a few ground rules. Please, everyone, mute your line. I've taken care of that on the back end, but if you become unmuted, please mute yourself. You can use the chat box to ask any questions, and we'll be answering all questions at the end of our webinar. For any additional questions not answered during the webinar, you can email us at education@nola.gov, and this webinar will be posted on our website, www.nola.gov/mosquito, and on our YouTube channel. Today's topic is protecting our trees from termites. Protecting historic and ornamental trees from termites not only helps preserve the beautification efforts of the city, but also helps protect your home. Today's presenters are Dr. Carrie Catone and Edward Freitag. Edward Freitag graduated in 1986 with a master's degree in entomology from the University of Wyoming. After working 1 year as a research associate in the entomology department at the Louisiana State University, researching bark beetle control, he joined the New Orleans Mosquito Control Board in 1987. From 1993 to 1996, he worked in a private toxicology laboratory in Mattawan, Michigan, conducting inhalation toxicology research with rats, mice, and primates. In early 1996, he resumed the field operations supervisor position with the New Orleans Mosquito and Termite Control Board, conducting termite field trials with liquid termiticides and bait systems. He is currently a research entomologist and assists with termite research operations with chemical manufacturers, universities, and federal agencies to test efficacy of chemicals for the control of Formosan, native, subterranean, and drywood termites. He is also involved in the testing and use of innovative technologies for the detection of termites in structure and trees. Ed Freitag is also an award-winning photographer and specializes in macro photography of insects. Dr. Carrie Catone has been employed by the City of New Orleans Mosquito and Termite Control Board for the past 15 years. She received her PhD in entomology in 2011 as a distance education student at the University of Florida. Her research focused on survival mechanisms of Formosan subterranean termite colonies during times of prolonged flooding. Her current job duties include managing our termite control division and working with collaborators to test new products and formulation for termite treatment.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that introduction. So today, talking about termites and trees, what kind of termites are we really talking about here? So here in Louisiana, along the rest of the Southeast U.S., our focus today is going to be the Formosan subterranean termite when it comes to protecting our trees. And that's because this particular species will readily attack live trees and cause very extensive damage. So I wanted to start out by reviewing a bit of the differences between subterranean termites and drywood termites. So they do belong in two different families. Subterranean termites belong in the family Rhinotermitidae, and drywoods are part of the family Calibration. Subterranean termites, as the name implies, they will nest underground, but they will also nest in trees and within lumber. They do need a constant source of moisture, and they get that from the soil that they're tunneling through. Because they nest under the ground level, their foraging territories can be quite large, which can help support very large colonies. So you can have colonies within millions. You can have millions of individual termites making up these subterranean colonies. Drywood colonies, on the other hand, they live entirely within the wood that they're feeding on, and they don't require any soil contact. So they get the moisture that they need from the wood that they're feeding on, the humidity from the air, and their own metabolism. So because they are confined within a piece of wood that they're infesting, their colonies are going to be much smaller. So during this talk, we are definitely talking about subterranean colonies here. And we are going to be focusing on Formosan subterranean termites, like I've said. So the main differences between Formosan colonies and our native Reticulitermes termites, they're very different. So Formosan colonies can get much larger, so they can have many more individuals within their colonies than our native colonies do. They also have a very larger soldier proportion. So within a Formosan colony, you might have 10% of those termites may be soldiers, whereas in a native colony, just 1% of those termites are going to be soldiers. The soldiers in a Formosan colony are also very aggressive, and they can actually secrete this white sticky fluid from their head when they are disturbed. Their swarming times are different. They swarm in the evenings as opposed to during the day for our natives, and the time of year is a bit different as well. And Formosan colonies are capable of creating aerial nests with no soil contact. So there are some morphological differences between our subterranean termites here in Louisiana, so it's very important to be able to tell them apart. As you can see on the left, the Formosan subterranean termite soldier has this really lovely teardrop-shaped head with very sharp, slender mandibles. As opposed to our native subterranean termites, those soldiers are going to have a head capsule that is more rectangular in shape, and their mandibles are going to be thicker and more blunt. Now, if you are looking at the alates, the swarmers of a Formosan subterranean termite, if you're able to look at those wings under a microscope, you will notice that they are covered in millions of hairs. So that's a really defining characteristic of Formosan subterranean termites here in Louisiana. And I wanted to review a little bit about termite foraging. These termites will feed on anything containing cellulose being the indigestible carbohydrate that makes up plant cell walls. So that means that they'll feed on wood and paper, really any product that contains wood fibers. Oops. Let me go back. And bear in mind, it's so important to look at termites in trees for the simple reason that they can have multiple satellite nests that are connected by underground foraging tunnels. So you could have a subterranean termite colony, foraging out of a tree that they're infesting that could possibly make their way into your home, right? So just keep in mind that a Formosan subterranean termite colony that's infesting a tree can be part of a larger web of colonies that's infesting neighboring structures. So why do termites tunnel? Well, it is a way for them to acquire resources that they require. It does help them maintain high humidity. It keeps them very protected. So these are soft-bodied insects, and they require high humidity. And creating these mud tubes or these shelter tubes helps maintain the humidity that they need, and it also protects them from predators such as ants. So they can be tunneling up a slab or along the outside of a tree, and it's almost impossible for predators to know that they're there unless you break those mud tubes open, and then you can see the live foraging termites inside. So Formosan termites will destroy a tree from the inside out. So they consume the heartwood of that tree. If a colony goes undisturbed for several years, the damage can lead to weakening of the root system and the trunk, and eventually that tree is going to have to come down, as you can see in the picture here. And they will eventually, fill the interior of that trunk with carton nest material. So that carton nest material is made of soil and cellulose and frass, which is their excrement, and saliva. And so they can really have a colony with millions of individual termites living within this tree. And as the tree is weakened by the feeding activity of termites, the tree eventually is either going to come down during a storm or it will need to be removed. Okay, many times during hurricanes here in New Orleans, we can see downed trees that look very similar to this, where you can see the inner portion of the tree hollowed out by a termite colony. And this can lead to some pretty severe property damage as well. So damage to property from a termite infested tree can be a lot more expensive than treating the tree in the first place by a licensed operator. And as you can see in these pictures here, some catastrophic damage can occur over time. So it's always best to check with your homeowner's insurance and your vehicle insurance to see what kind of coverage you would have in a situation like this, because a termite infestation within your home is typically not covered by homeowner's insurance, which is pretty important when you consider the economic importance of termites. Okay, so termites, it's $1 billion business each year. And just alone, and these numbers are a little bit older. Trees in New Orleans, just to have remedial and preventative treatment, that can be in the millions. So over $6 million that can cost. And trees here in New Orleans are incredibly important. Okay, they are iconic. They help make up our landscape. They are important for urban beautification. And, you know, some of these trees are very expensive to replace. And our historic trees, especially our historic oaks in City Park that have been here for hundreds of years, those are absolutely irreplaceable. And as you can see here, termites can just cause absolute devastation to some of these larger trees. You can see this tree here was once a very, very large, I believe it was an oak, and just completely hollowed out by termites, taken down during a strong storm, and it just had to be removed. And really, it is a safe bet to consider no tree be considered termite proof. So termites attack many different types of trees: oaks, maples, even cedar, sycamores, palms, just about anything that contains cellulose. So remember, no tree should be considered termite proof. And at this point, I'm going to let our tree inspection expert, Ed Freitag, talk about tree inspections.
Thanks, Gary. Appreciate it. So it's important that you understand how to find termites in trees and why we're inspecting the trees. As Carrie mentioned, Formosan termites attack trees, and because they attack the trees, well, the problem is that they can eventually maybe come to your house and attack your house too. So why is it important then? Well, they're always foraging. So termites, even though they have food in a tree, they're always looking for other places to eat. So if you have maybe lumber next to the house and firewood or some kind of trash wood that you put in under the house, they'll find that and eventually get inside the house. So termite colony feeding on training yard means that termites are in close proximity to your home. And that's just not a very good thing when you have an expensive house. So getting rid of the termites, finding that they're close is very important. So how do you look for termites then? Well, right now, this time of the year when we have the Formosan termites swarming, they tend to put a lot of mud on the outside, on the bark, on the outside of the tree. So it's relatively easy to go to a tree and find if there's Formosan termites. You can find only some mud on the tree. And they put this mud on as a means of protection when they're swarming. So they put this, the termites swarm from these structures. They have a lot of soldiers during the night. So it provides them some protection. But at the same time, it makes it easy for us to find those trees that have Formosan termites. Sometimes you just find them on the limbs that have been cut. And as you can see, there are no trails from the exterior to the inside of the tree. Those termites are coming from the inside of the tree, which means that the colony is probably at the base of this tree in the root system and is eating the tree from the inside out. So over time, like we saw in some of these pictures, the branches might break or the tree might fall over during the storm. So it's relatively easy to find termites in a tree. I always start at the base because they are, after all, subterranean termites. And by digging at the base of the tree around the roots, sometimes you can find the Formosan soldiers, typically what you find. Or the other thing you can do is just start digging around the bark and you'll find some mud, some of these trails, and you start scraping it. And next thing you know, there's a whole bunch of soldiers coming out. So it's not difficult to find them, but sometimes it can be tedious. Sometimes you have to spend a little bit of time looking for them because for whatever reason, they may not put any mud on the outside. And so sometimes you have to go to extreme situations where you climb the tree to get up high if they don't have a ladder, looking for the termites. This picture happened to be in other parts of Louisiana where we're looking for termites in other parishes. We're trying to establish how far north the termites have gone. So, though it happens though that just because you know how to inspect a tree doesn't mean you're going to find termites. Sometimes there's just no signs of them. There's no mud, there's no trails, and there's no light termites on the outside. So what can you do with that then? Well, back in the days when we used to do this research, we would drill a hole and would stick a wood dowel. And then we would check it a couple days later, pull it out, and it's kind of like an aardvark tongue, you know, it'd be full of termites and say, oh, this tree has termites. But eventually we found some tools that work a lot better. A borescope or flexible video scope can be used to explore the inside of the tree. And I have a video that I'm going to show you so you can see what happens inside a tree. So hopefully this will play. Oh, I can't get it to play. Why is it not playing? Help. Trying to get it. For whatever reason, it's not. Technical difficulty.
We are having some technical difficulties. We may have to come back to that.
Okay.
We may have to pull.
Well, we'll just keep going with the lecture here, and then if we can, we'll show you what the termites look inside a tree. So I think Carrie, you're going to talk about treatments, or you want me to do it?
Go ahead and start with the phone.
Okay. All right. So we're going to talk about treatments. So there's several options that you can have for treating termites in trees. So they can be a liquid termiticide applied as the tree as a foam, liquid termiticide applied in the soil as a liquid around the perimeter of the tree, or you can place termite base stations, blades, and soil around the perimeter of a tree. So basically, here in Louisiana, the law, it basically applies to a tree like it applies to a structure. The tree has to be put on a contract in order for that tree to be treated. And here in New Orleans, it's probably best if you ask the city of New Orleans if it's a city tree, whether that tree can be treated. So the question is, should I use a foam or baits? Well, both of them actually are quite good at what they do. They both mitigate the damage done to the tree by removing the termite threat. Now, there's one thing you have to remember, though, is once the termites have done a lot of damage inside the tree, even if you kill the termites, the tree is not going to repair itself. Once that wood, that heartwood is gone, it's gone. It's just not going to repair itself in there. So for foam injections, you'd want to find the central voids, that is the areas that the termites have eaten, and they probably put some mud and probably put some carton nest. So trees that are very small, probably not a very good idea to drill. So you normally stay within 10 inches of diameter. So so there's kind of a amount of material you want to put inside the tree. You want to put just enough to fill the voids. But if a tree is too big that you need to put more than 5 gallons of mixed termiticide, then that's going to be a difficult tree to treat. So we also have to be aware that you can't treat with a termiticide with foam fruit-bearing trees. So baits don't have to worry that it's a central void, and don't have to worry about a small tree, or don't have to worry about a tree that's too big, because the baits are going to be around on the perimeter of the tree. Typically, they go in the ground. So there are some exceptions from fruit-bearing trees, because we can put an above ground station. And also trees should never be drilled. And one of the reasons for this is because trees, I mean, palms aren't really trees. They're separate. So they don't have the vascular system is the whole inside of the tree. So that's all living tissue. So tree injections with foam, let's talk about that. What happens then? Okay, so the way this works is you're trying to put the foam inside the tree. You're trying to find those voids where the termites are living. So normally you want to put a 1/2 inch hole into the tree. And for this, the best thing to do is to use probably pretty strong electric drill or a something like or an echo drill, which is a gas power drill. And you want to put at least 4 access holes at the base of the tree and about 4 more at chest level, so that you can find all these access, also all these cavities inside. So based on the research that we did, we found that a termiticide solution is applied at a 15-to-1 expansion ratio. That means that for every gallon of liquid, you're going to create 15 gallons of foam. The reason for this is you want that foam to expand into all the areas inside the tree. When we did our research, we found that if you applied a liquid termiticide, basically goes straight down. It doesn't move inside the tree. So that's why we figured out that the foam was the best way of doing it. So foam is applied to all the access holes, and then the access holes are covered with rubber or plastic plugs. So like I said, we can use a gas power drill, or you can use something, the new drills, battery powered drills are actually strong enough to do this. But you should have a reverse on your drill, because a lot of times these drill bits get stuck, and you don't want to break it off and leave it inside the tree. So the best type of drill for this is a wood chip auger, and I'll have a picture of that later to show you what that looks like. The other thing that's important to think about is if you're drilling from one tree to another tree, you may carry some pathogens. So it's best to use a 10% bleach solution to prevent the spread of pathogens. So before you drill the tree, clean that drill with a 10% bleach, and then you go to the next tree, again, clean the drill. So here's the picture of the wood chip auger. And the reason that this works really well on the tree is because it only goes as fast as that screw in the tip can go in. Where if you use a metal drill bit, basically it starts drilling so fast that it's almost like it just goes in and it doesn't take the chips out. So with the wood chip auger, you have to pull the chips out as you're drilling. With a metal drill bit, it's the wood is so soft and the fibers basically get tangled in there, and you're going to lose that drill bit in there. When we first started doing this, we found out that that's just not the right kind of drill to use. So this is what you're looking for. You're looking for either the carton nest or all the cavities inside the tree where the termites are feeding. So when you're drilling, you can feel that when there's no resistance, that you hit a void or you hit the carton nest. So the idea here is to put that foam where the termites are living. So in extreme cases, when the trees are very big, like we have here, some of the live oaks, you may have to fabricate an expansion to this auger in order to reach the center of the tree. Here's an example of one of the pest control operators drilling into a very large tree that was infested with Formosan termites. So the different kinds of foamers, on the left, you have what's called a Pest foamer. This company has been selling these for a long time. It uses electricity. So when you go in the field with this, you need to have something to power it. And normally what we use is we use an inverter hooked up to the battery of the motor of the car, and that way we can power this. Or you can use the one on the right. It's a smaller unit, much easier to use, but both of them basically do the same thing. They use air to create an expansion of the foam. You have to put a foaming agent in order for this to work properly. So what do we need to use the foam injection then? Well, here's what you need. You need to have water, and you want to be able to at least use the non-repellent liquid termiticides. And the reason for this is that termites don't know they're actually being treated. They can't detect this termiticide. Once the foam dissipates, though, termites will cross through these treated galleries and will die from exposure to the pesticide. Always check the label directions for mixing PP and use restrictions. The other thing that you have to remember too is that the foaming agent will have some directions, will give you some guidelines as to how much to put in there. But one of the things you can do is you can check your equipment to make sure you're doing a 15-to-1 expansion ratio. So why do you want to use a non-repellent? Well, let's talk about the advantage of that. Termites tunnel through the treated area without avoidance. That's important because that keeps them from avoiding the galleries that you treated. So termites are not affected by initial foaming, will continue to use galleries after the foam dissipates. And that will affect, the pesticide will kill them after that. And there's also transfer of chemical between nestmates. So let's just say that they're attacking a tree, but their nest is in another tree. Well, termites will carry the material to the other tree and eventually kill the main nest. So how termites are transferred? Well, termites are constantly touching each other. You know, we got to remember they live in a very nasty environment, live in very humid environment in soil. So they're always grooming themselves. They share food between nestmates. And by exchanging regurgitated nutrients through a process called trophallaxis, they can carry these chemicals back and forth. So the termites do not realize that when they're tunneling through an area that's treated with a non-repellent, they don't know this, it's actually treated. So that's the advantage of these non-repellents. So termites in direct contact with treated area will die. If the termiticide works slowly, that's even better, because then the termites have time to contact each other and expose them to the pesticide. So I was mentioning earlier that it's important to have that 15-to-1. So how do we calibrate your equipment? Well, one of the easiest things is to fill your equipment with 1 gallon of fluid or water, put the foam material in there, and then fill a 5-bucket. Use a 5-gallon bucket, and you should be able to fill it 3 times. So if you only fill it once, then you got to put more of the foamer material. And if you fill 5 of them, then you definitely got too much foam in there. So you have to, every foaming material is different. So there's not like you can say you only put so much. You have to calibrate your equipment. The consistency of the foam should be semi-dry. It's kind of like shaving cream, because if it's too wet, it's not going to move vertically up the tree, which is what we want it to do. And the problem with if it's too dry, though, is that then you're going to fill the tree with foam, but you're not going to have enough chemical in there, so it may not be as efficient. So a maximum of 5 gallons of solution, which is 75 gallons of foam, are injected into a large tree. Any more than that, you're just putting too much chemical. So you should wear personal equipment, protective equipment, if it's required by the label. In this case, we're using a chemical that did not require any PPE. And again, we want to distribute this foam evenly through all the drilled access holes. And the reason for that is sometimes it compartmentalizes the galleries. And just because you see foam coming in one end and out the other doesn't mean it's going to every place. So here's a tree in particular that we knew this tree was in sad shape. It had a lot of damage from termites. And when we started this for demonstration purposes, we overfilled it with foam, and you can see the foam coming out for all kinds of other orifices that weren't the drill holes that we put in there. So you really don't want to leave this for kids to play. So you should either wash it off or use an anti-foam material to reduce that foam. So here's foam injection for most termite gallery inside a tree. You can see the termites in there. Let's see if this will play. For whatever reason, we're not having our videos playing today.
I know, this is
So basically what happens is you're forcing the foam inside the cavities at about 20 psi, 20 pounds per square inch. So that foam actually it's very forcefully going inside the tree, and it will coat the termites and it will coat all their galleries. So by the time you see that coming out of the tree, you pretty much coated the whole inside of the tree. Let's see if I can go to the next one. Oh, it's playing. Look at that.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Good.
So these are the termites. Notice how they're inside the tree. Notice how active they got. And then you can see the foam coming in. We're using one of those video probes that are digital video probes that, you know, to look inside the tree and see how fast that foam starts coming inside the galleries and through this is the drill hole you're looking in. And not only does the foam touch them directly, but it leaves a residue. So any termite that did not get direct contact, yeah, oops, now it played twice. It's kind of neat too. Once you're done using the foam, that foam will recede and dry up, and you can see all the dead Formosan termites, and it kind of makes you feel good that you know, hopefully you got rid of these termites. Let's see, did I go too fast? Yeah, okay. So the tree foam injection summary. So foam injections using a 15-to-1 gallon expansion rates are more effective than liquid injections. Remember, I said liquids go straight down. They just follow gravity. The foam should be applied into the cavities or galleries via 1/2 inch drill hole. The reason for a 1/2 inch drill hole, because that's the standard size for drilling into concrete. So all the tools will work the same. Premise termiticide was effective to about 2.5 years. We got about 50% control in our field trials. Termidor and Phantom, we got 2 to 3 years of control and typically in the 90% range. So follow-up inspections should be performed at least annually because we have seen after 3 years the termites come back. That for whatever reason, the termiticide doesn't last very long inside a tree. So the termiticide plus the foam, we call it termites. And again, like I said before, it does not make the tree heal itself. So contrary to belief, once you get rid of the termites, the damage is still there. So I'm going to let Carrie talk about baits for treating termites in tree.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ed. So we've talked about foaming trees to treat them against termites. Now let's talk a little bit about baiting. So when we talk about baiting, we always bring up the phrase population management, or that it's a population management approach. And I just wanted to kind of review what that means exactly. So if you think of a huge termite colony, it can be made up of millions of individual termites, right? So you have this massive colony that can really be seen as an organism by itself. You have a queen that is constantly producing eggs. You can have multiple queens that are constantly producing eggs for that colony. Formosan termite pressure is incredibly high in New Orleans. So we can have many colonies in a relatively small area. So at least here in New Orleans and along the Southeast US, termite risk is incredibly high. And baits work by exploiting the natural social behavior of termites, right? So we've talked about how termite colonies are constantly foraging. So even if they're infesting a tree, they're still going to be foraging, looking for that bigger, better meal. So they're going to have all of these underground galleries that are either going to be going to somebody's house or another tree nearby. So through their natural foraging tendencies, they are going to locate bait stations that are put in the ground. And what happens is once they hit bait stations, the matrix of that bait has gone through many palatability tests. So researchers know that it's going to taste really good to termites. So workers start eating that bait, and they actually put down feeding pheromones that tell other termites that, hey, this is where you want to eat. This is delicious. And so that is how they communicate to other termites that they want to feed on that bait as well. They are also going to be doing something called trophallaxis, okay, which is a natural social exchange of regurgitated liquids between colony members. And the whole reason they do that is, if you remember back in part 1, we talked about how termites don't digest wood themselves. They need all of that gut fauna, the bacteria and protozoa, to help them digest the cellulose. And every time they molt, they shed all of that natural, gut fauna. And so they have to regain that from other members of their colony. Okay, so you have this exchange of food and trophallaxis, and you even have some termite casts that can't feed themselves. Okay, so you have the workers that are feeding the larvae, the soldiers, and the queen. right? So larvae, they're newly hatched. They're not going to be feeding themselves. Soldiers have these huge mandibles that make it impossible for them to take apart wood to actually consume it. So they depend on the workers to feed them. And the queen, she is very large, very engorged, basically an ovary with legs. And even though she can move around, why would she if she has workers that are willing to tend to her, right? So this means that termites within the colony don't have to feed directly on the bait in order to be affected by the active ingredient. So this is how you have an active ingredient within the bait dispersed throughout the entire colony. And there are many commercial products that are available on the market now. Some of the big ones that you've probably heard of, those are your Centricons and your advanced stations. Those are the ones that are label rated nowadays, where you can put them in the ground and it only requires them to be serviced once a year at minimum based on the label. But there are other products out there. There's Xterra and First Line and Terminate as well. So there's a lot of different bait products out there to choose from. However, there are some characteristics that you want in a bait in order for it to be really effective. Okay, first of all, you don't want to have any kind of feeding deterrence. So you want termites to locate that bait and put down those feeding pheromones and basically tell all their buddies that this is a great spot to have for lunch because it's absolutely delicious. And laboratory researchers have done test after test after test on these bait products to make sure that termites find them absolutely delicious. Okay, you also want a bait that is slow acting, okay, just like the ones that are on the market today. And that might sound really counterintuitive because you would think that, yeah, if you want to kill termites quickly, then you would want something that's going to actually kill them quickly, right? However, though, if you have termites feeding at a bait station, and if they die very quickly, it's going to do two different things. You're going to have an accumulation of dead termites around that bait station, and that's actually going to be a repellent for other termites. That's going to be kind of a warning for them that they don't want to eat there. Okay, so if you have an accumulation of dead termites, the other termites in the colony are just kind of going to wall them up and they're not going to go anywhere near that bait station. Also, if the bait is fast acting, that's not going to give termites enough time or the opportunity to transfer that active ingredient to other termites within the colony through that food sharing and trophallaxis that we've discussed. Okay, a bait also needs to be dose independent. So really, this is kind of the phrase "a little dabble do ya," right? So the bait needs to have the same effect on termites, whether they feed on a lot of that bait or they just get a little bit of the bait through that food sharing. And there have been different active ingredients for baits that have been developed throughout the years. So when baits first kind of got on the market, folks tried things like stomach poisons and metabolic inhibitors like sulfuramide and borates, things like that. However, insect growth regulators is really what you're going to find in the baits that are produced nowadays. There have been bait products in the past that have used juvenoid hormones, but the big heavy hitters that you see nowadays, they will have chitin synthesis inhibitors as their active ingredients, such as novaflumaron and novaluron. And what that does is, just like the name implies, it prevents termites from being able to produce chitin. And this is very important. So chitin is a component of the exoskeleton, right? So a termite is going to have to molt throughout its lifetime. And if a termite cannot molt, it will die. So if it cannot produce chitin in order to produce a new exoskeleton, then it can't molt, and then it ends up dying in a pretty dramatic fashion. Okay, so no matter what bait station is used around a tree, the process of installing them is going to be very similar. Okay, and it's very similar to, say, the installation of baits around structures that we talked about in part 3 of this webinar series. So you first create a hole in the ground where your station is going to fit. You insert the station into the soil and you make it flush with the soil surface. Now, depending on the size of the tree, you might have 4 bait stations around that tree. You could have 6. You might even have more than 6 if it's one of these, historic oak trees that's a few hundred years old, and they are incredibly large. So like we've already discussed, kind of want to review when it would be appropriate to use baits as opposed to foam. So if you're trying to foam a tree and you're drilling into it and you can't find a central void, you can't inject foam into a tree with no void, right? So that would be a very appropriate time to use a bait product instead of foam. If it's too small to drill, of course, you're going to want to use baits. Or if it is so large that it's going to require more than 5 gallons of that mixed termiticide solution to fill the void, baits would absolutely be appropriate. And remember, you never want to drill palm trees, and you also don't want to treat fruit-bearing trees with a liquid termiticide as well. So the species does have, you have to kind of determine what you're going to use based on the tree species as well. So here's a picture of some folks from our group at Delaron and Chalmette. We were doing a research study here. So you can see here some of these trees are quite large, and we are installing advanced bait stations around these trees. Another area where we use baits a lot is city parks. So this is one of those historic oaks that I was telling you about. You can see in the picture how small that person looks right by that tree. That is how large that tree is. Also, some of the limbs of that tree have grown so large that they're actually resting on the ground as well. So there you have more wood to ground contact. So you not only would put bait stations around the trunk of that tree, but also those limbs that are touching the ground as well. Another great part of using baits around these historic oaks is that there's no having to justify having to drill inside of a tree that's 200 years old. We've kind of talked a little bit about how pathogens can be spread from drilling, and if these trees are already damaged, there's a lot of people who are trying to save these trees and they don't want any further damage to happen to them through drilling. One little pro tip, if you are putting bait stations around a tree, you certainly want to put them as close to the tree trunk as possible. This is not always the easiest thing to do because sometimes, the root systems are so large that you try to drill a hole into the ground and you just hit root after root after root. But instead of moving away from the tree, try moving your drill side from one side to the other, okay? Because a lot of times what happens is those roots kind of fork, and then you can maybe put a bait station right in the middle of 2 roots that have forked. Okay, if you're using a bait system that includes above ground bait stations, this is a really great thing to be able to use on trees. So not all bait systems have this option. But it does allow for very targeted application. So you would use something like this if you find active mud tubes on the outside of a tree, or a swarm structure, those nice mud packs on those cut limbs that Ed was showing you. So this would be a really great opportunity to use these above ground bait stations. If you find live foraging termites on the outside of a tree, definitely this should be an option. So this is great in one of 2 ways. So you have flexible station placement. Okay, so you can put it really anywhere on the outside of that tree. It fits this population management concept. So you're still delivering bait to termites, but you're removing that lag time that it would take for termites to forage outside of that tree and locate in-ground bait stations. It's basically, instead of opening up a restaurant for termites and waiting for them to come to you, it's like Meals on Wheels for them, and you can just deliver the bait directly to the termites. Now, when there are trees that are associated with structures, you always want to check with the label or the bait manufacturer or even the state regulator when you're applying bait around trees, okay, that are associated with that structure, because not all bait systems can be used in the same way. A perfect example of this is with the Centricon system and the advanced system. So you have the Centricon system where the label says that sites that only contain trees can be treated with a bait, but if there's a structure that's associated with those trees, then you also have to treat the structure. Whereas the advanced system says that structures associated with baited trees don't necessarily have to have bait applied around them, but that bait would be considered a spot treatment. So always check the label when you're dealing with trees associated with structures. So homeowners can actually do a lot when it comes to um, mitigating termite damage to the trees that are in your yard. We've shown you a bit how to look for signs of termite infestation on the outside of your trees. You can look for those mud tubes and swarm structures right now. If you're in Louisiana along the Gulf South where there's Formosan termites, right now is their swarm season. So you might want to consider taking a look at your trees, see if you see any of those mud packs on any cut limbs or swarm structures like that. You also want to talk to your pest management professional. So if you have a termite contract on your house, really consider having that conversation about inspecting and treating the trees that are in your yard. Like we've said, we've seen many times in the field where there is a tree that's infested in somebody's front yard and those termites have made their way to the house. Okay, so if you do see termites on the outside of your tree, you want to tell your pest control company immediately about that. And if you're worried about the structural integrity of your trees, so let's say you've had infestations of trees in your yard in the past, or you might have an infestation now, your trees might be infested, and you're worried about it, coming down the next time there's a strong storm or something like that, that is when you want to talk to a licensed arborist. Okay, and if you end up having to cut down a tree in your yard because it's infested with termites, please still treat that stump. Okay, cutting down a tree is not going to eliminate a termite colony. Remember, these termites are subterranean. They will still be under the soil surface, and there may even be satellite nests and multiple reproductive pairs that you are unaware of. So, like Ed has said, treating a tree for termites, it's never going to fix the termite damage that's already there. Okay, but it will prevent further damage by taking care of the termite infestation that's in place. Okay, so once termites are located within a tree, the damage is already done. I don't want anybody to panic if you find termites in your trees. We want you to let the professionals do the work. Okay, they have more tools available, they have the experience and the product knowledge. So in summary, I just want to reiterate that tree inspections are incredibly important for homeowners, especially if those trees are in your front yard, backyard, in close proximity to your home. They can be treated successfully, either with a foam injection or with the use of a bait system. But really, that all depends on the size of the tree, whether or not a pest management professional can find a central void, and of course, the tree species. So at this point, I would first like to thank everybody for attending today, and I will gladly open it up for any questions that you might have. Yes, and please use the chat if you have any questions. In the meantime, though, I will say that, if you're not following us on social media, I do encourage that. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at NOLA Mosquito. And right now, since it is swarm season, we are looking at tracking swarming termites, and we have a termite meter on social media now. So if you want to follow our termite swarm barometer, it is at NOLA Mosquito.
I don't see any questions in the chat box.
Okay. Okay, well, I will thank everybody again for attending, and this webinar will be posted at our website, www.nola.gov/mosquito.
Thank you, Dr. Catone. Everyone enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.